In this video, which is related with change and continuity in India, let us first understand its objectives. The first objective is to study the impact of colonial rule in Indian society. Second, to analyze the reasons for uneven growth of social classes in India. Third, to understand the role of reform movements and revivalist movements on Indian society. And the fourth objective is to study about social classes in urban India. So, now let us first discuss the impact of colonial period on social structure. The emergence of new social classes in India was the consequence of far reaching changes brought about by the British in the economic structure of India. The first change they brought about was in the area of agriculture. The British administration revolutionized the existing land revenue system. It did away with the traditional rights of the village community over the village land. Instead, it created individual ownership rights in land by introducing certain measures during the 18th century, such as the permanent settlement, the Royatwari settlement, and the Mehelwari settlement. With this land settlements, land became a private property, a commodity in the market. It could be mortgaged, purchased, or sold. Till this time, the village ownership of land existed and village was a unit of assessment. But now with this new settlement, a new class of landowners were created whose interest was confined only to the collection of rents and taxes. These several landlords never stayed in the village, they owned the land, they were also known as absentee landlords. The whole structure of landlords, that is the zamindars, tenants, subtenants and agricultural labor existed and depended on the land. This structure varied from region to region depending on the owners, the intermediaries and the cultivators during the colonial period. So, we can see that there is a change in the class structure due to the change in the agrarian relations. However, with the expanding railway and transport system, production for market became well established. The commercialization of agriculture in terms of the growth of trade and commerce led to an emergence of new classes in India. Now, let us study how trade and commerce influenced our class structure. Trade and commerce were centered around two things. First, supply of raw material for industries in Britain and procuring British manufactured goods for consumption in India. The procurement of goods for consumption in India had a disastrous effect on the town and the village handicraft. The indigenous handicraft item could not face the competition from the British manufactured goods, which were machine made and products of high industrialization. Thus, the indigenous village and town handicrafts got disintegrated, artisans lost their livelihood and some migrated to the city, some fell back on agriculture, which in turn led to mass impoverishment. Along with this, the British government also invested a lot on the expanding of railways and roads. The expansion of railway was done with a view to meet the raw material requirements of industries in Britain. The construction of railways and roads also gave scope for investment of British capital in India. It also led to better mobility of troops for establishment of law and order. The investment of British capital found an outlet initially in such spheres such as plantation, crops, indigo, tea, cotton, jute were grown, and there were investments in mining industry. This led to the beginning of industrialization process in India. By then, there was an accumulation of sufficient saving on the part of the Indian traders and merchants. They served as capital and made possible the creation of industries owned by Indians in certain cities. So, we have studied that with the changes in the agrarian system and the introduction of railways, there was wide mobility of people. Now, let us study the state and administrative system. To deal with these aspects of Indian social reality, the British government had organized a huge and an extensive state machinery to administer its conquered territory. The civil services, which even exist today, was created by the Britishers to deal with the task of civil administration. It initially had British officers, but later on, as the number of educated Indians increased, it came to be manned by Indians. It was not possible for the British to secure staff of educated people from Britain for running such a huge administrative machinery. Therefore, they introduced the West system of education in India to primarily serve their own needs. Thus, schools, colleges and universities were established to impart Western education to Indians. As a result of it, the Indian society experienced an uneven growth of social classes. Now, let us discuss what are the features of this growth of social classes which was uneven in nature. The social forces which developed during the colonial period spread both in time and tempo unevenly, giving rise to growth of social classes. The reason for uneven impact of British rule was because of the political power was also unevenly distributed. For example, in Bengal there were two classes of zamindars and the tenants were highly exploited. Again in Bengal and Bombay, industrial enterprises were also created. This led to an emergence of a class of industrialists and workers in this region. It is for this reason only that the British established a complex administrative system and introduced modern education first in Bengal and Mumbai. Along with these developments, the rise of new classes was also within the communities. So, we understand and we have studied also that certain communities had their own definite socio-economic and educational related norms prior to British period. For example, the Vaishyas or the Baniyas were traders by birth and it was part of their traditional social structure. So, they were the first one to take up modern commerce, banking and industrial enterprises. Similarly, Brahmins were the first to take up modern education and enter professional classes. These communities also took up new challenges and entered the sphere of activity first because they possessed the basic attitude towards these occupations. Thus, on the eve of independence, we find that Indian social structure was made up of innumerable classes and they coincided with each other and had certain universal features. Now, let us study the importance of national movement and its role in class structure. In the 19th century and early part of 20th century, the middle class began to think in terms of reforming and modernizing Indian society. There were a number of movements which were both religious and social in nature. Meanwhile, the political movement of freedom also began only at the end of 19th century. The social reality at that time was very complex. We had rise of new educated middle class. The reformist and the revivalist movement had close connections with the political movement for independence from British India. Now, let us discuss the reformist movement. On the early 19th century, we have reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy of Bengal, who believed that Indians could become progressive only if they shed the superstitions and evil practices such as sati and infanticide, etc. He advocated a new kind of religion which was based on philosophy of universal brotherhood. He founded the Brahmo Samaj, which was meant to be a spiritual forum, and the members can join without any barriers of caste or superstition. Raja Ram Mohan Roy's influence was mainly confined to urban elite groups of Bengal. In the same time period, we have Mahadev Govind Ranade, a jurist of Maharashtra, who founded the Prarthana Samaj in Bombay. He had basically modeled it on the Brahmo Samaj of Bengal. So, the social reaction of these movements was quite different. The Brahmo Samaj was focused and opposed strongly the orthodox Hindu movement, and there was a confrontation between tradition and modernity, whereas in other movements there is no direct conflict between the tradition and modernity. So, we find these social movements also led to strong movements of protests by the lower caste groups against the domination of the upper caste group. We have certain movements such as by reformers like Jyotirao Govind Rao Phule, which was basically for people from the lower caste. Then we have the revivalist movement, which focused on the identity of the Hindu religion and revival of the lost honor. So, we have the Arya Samaj launched by Swami Dayanand Saraswati, which was based on the appeal of people to shed the unhealthy features of Hinduism such as caste, orthodoxy, ritualism, and go back to purity of Veda. So, they sponsored a different kind of education system which was had more traditional and modern component. So, the DAV or the Dayanand Anglo Vedic colleges were established in northern India on a wide scale. We have the Ramakrishna mission founded by Swami Vivekanand after his religious guru Shri Ramakrishna Paramahans ideology. The mission was basically to make people educated in terms of the Indian culture, to take responsibility of the weaker section, to remove poverty, and secondly to propagate Indian Vedanta to Westerners. So, as a result of it, we find that many schools and various movements were initiated to improve education and economic prospects of common people. Number of centers were established to bring about spiritual awakening among the Indians. Now, during the time of independence, we know and we have studied also the role of Indian National Congress, which was founded in 1885, primarily with the basic purpose to establish a political forum for discussions and debate. Most of the members of the Congress were drawn from the urban elite group. With the coming up of our father of nation M.K. Gandhi on the political scene, the Congress movement became a mass political movement in which members were drawn from urban professional groups, peasants, artisans and industrial workers. There were a number of initiatives that were taken for the freedom of the country, for example, the Swadeshi movement, non-cooperation movement in 1922, civil disobedience movement 1932-34 and Quit India movement. Many Indians were executed and they were also involved in various activities for independence. The social religious movement indirectly contributed to the political movements through their reforms. These movements induced self-confidence and created political consciousness, which led to the development in Indian society. Now, let us discuss the problems in terms of class when India attained independence. India acquired independence on the historic day of 15th August 1947 and its constitution was framed. The Indian constitution focused on the concept of self-governance. India had number of challenges due to partition. We had communal rights and the society was struggling for a meaningful existence. The policy makers of independent India focused on certain measures. First of all, they abolished untouchability through constitutional intervention. Secondly, they initiated a policy of reservation for depressed classes in government jobs and legislatures as a part of the policy of protective discrimination. Third, they ensured religious freedom and protecting the right of various minority groups. So, with all these principles of social justice were incorporated in the constitution. The efforts of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and Jawaharlal Nehru and others are noteworthy in incorporating them into the constitution. So, we came up with this kind of legislations and we tried to minimize the social problems, but the problems that independent India faced was first problem of poverty, both absolute and relative terms, and second rise in population despite tremendous economic development. We know that poverty and rise of population are interrelated phenomena and they form a vicious circle. So, there was a rise of slums in cities, rise of unemployment, crime in urban areas. As a result of it, there were a lot of changes that took place in the class structure of India. Now, let us study the social classes in urban India. In urban areas, social classes comprise of primarily the first the capitalist, which are the commercial or the industrial class. Second, we have the corporate sector. Third, we have the professional classes. Fourth, we have petty traders and shopkeepers, and in the end, we have the working class. Now, let us discuss each of them one by one. The first is the commercial and industrial class. We know that under the British rule, production in India became production for market. As a result of this, internal market expanded and the class of traders engaged in internal trading grew. Simultaneously, India was also linked up with the world market. This led to the growth of class of merchants engaged in export-import business. Thus, we have an emergence of a commercial class in this country. With the establishment of railways and accumulation of saving on the part of the rich commercial class, they had huge capital to be invested in large scale manufacturing goods and modern industries. They pioneered the industrial establishment in India and also made investments in plantation, cotton, jute mining, etc. Thus, Indian society had a new set of subgroup of mill owners as well as industrialists who diversified into the sphere of industrial activities. This class turned out to be the strongest class in India. With the attainment of independence, the emphasis was laid on rapid industrialization of the country, in which the state played a very active role. It involved economic and industrial policies which clearly indicated the role of commercial and industrial class as a catalyst for industrialization in India. It also actively assisted such classes towards augmentation of production. We know that India has introduced the concept of mixed economy, which implied that both public and private sector in Indian economy could coexist. Important industries and trade was left to the private individuals, and with the creation of infrastructure and the establishment of heavy and strategic industries by the state, there was a phenomenal rise in the number of industrialists who owned and controlled the capital of this country. It also led to the rise of commercial classes. The commercial and the business classes grew in scale and size in the post-independent era. These industries were not confined to traditional sectors such as textile, jute, mining or plantation, but there was considerable diversification into service sector, into steel manufacturing, and as a result of it, it led to even inequality among industrial classes. There was heavy concentration of assets, resources and income in few business houses, and later on with the advent of globalization, the situation changed. The second class is the corporate sector. Any organization that is under government ownership and controlled is called a public sector unit, and any organization which does not belong to the public sector can be part of the private sector. The firms and organizations which are owned, controlled and managed exclusively by the private individuals and entities are included in the private sector. All private sector firms can be classified into various categories. They can be collectively owned as partnership firms, joint Hindu family firms or as cooperatives. One of the most important feature of this is that they promoted Indian industrial growth. They were highly diversified. They made contributions in terms of value addition to national economy. It led to privatization and liberalization of India in 1991, which led to the considerable development of service sector. So, a new class emerged from the private corporate sector, which played a very important role in developing consumer trends in India. After this, let us study the professional class. The new economic and state system we have already studied. By the British rule required cadre of educated Indians trained in modern law, technology, medicine, economics, administrative science and other subjects. So, as a result of it only, the British government was forced to introduce modern education system in India. They established number of educational schools, colleges to provide legal, commercial and general education to meet the needs of the state and the economy. This led to the growth of professional classes. Now today we have social categories which are linked up with modern professional classes associated with agriculture, commerce, finance, administration and other fields. These professional classes comprise of lawyers, doctors, teachers, managers, engineers working in modern commercial and other enterprises, officials functioning in the state administrative machinery, technologists, researchers and journalists. Their role in the national movement was decisive and they were pioneers and pace setters, and today they are the forces behind progressive social and religious development of this country. This has led to rapid industrialization and urbanization in post-independent India and has opened the way for large-scale employment opportunities in the industries, trade and commerce, transport and other economic activities. Moreover, the state has also created a massive institutional, complex bureaucratic structure throughout the length and breadth of the country. This has also provided employment to a number of people with requisite qualifications, training and skills. So, we have bureaucrats, we have management executives, we have technocrats, teachers, journalists who possess such skills. They have grown considerably in size and scale ever since independence. So, we know that class is not generally a homogeneous category. There are a lot of changes that take place between the upper class and the lower caste. Some are placed on the higher cadre, on the others are doing a lot of manual work also. So, we have different classes that are operating in India. After understanding these professionals, let us now understand the role of petty traders, shopkeepers and unorganized workers. In addition to the new classes, in the urban areas we have small shopkeepers. These class of shopkeepers are developed with the growth of modern cities and towns. They constitute the link between the producers of goods and commodities, and as sellers they buy goods from the producers and sell them to the consumers. So, they live on their profit margin of the prices and they sell everyday goods and services. So, this class has also grown in the post independent India. There is a lot of unprecedented growth due to urbanization, and lack of avenues for employment in urban society has also led to large scale migration of rural population to towns in search of employment. This migration is in thousands and lakhs of workers who are moving from small size villages or towns to big cities for better opportunities, activities and for employment. So, there is a need for various kinds of services. So, these petty shopkeepers and trading centers are also part of the urban population. A section of urban population draws its livelihood from these sources. Their size has considerably increased and it offers employment in both organized and unorganized sector of the economy. The opportunities are small and they require basic skills, educational qualifications and training. Therefore, this sector has become very popular and this class is growing in number. The members of this class, they work on small scale production units, crafts, industry or they work on manual occupations. They many times get less benefits compared to the organized labor workforce. Now, with the changes in the labor law and the approach of the government is more to come up with more skilled workforce in India and to change the labor relations in the unorganized sector. We are coming up with various laws as well as strategies to help them to regularize their wages, working conditions and working days. So, as a result of it, we find that this class needs lot of support from the government, but it is easy to enter into this class because the qualifications levels are not very high. So, these semi-skilled and unskilled workers also are part of this class and they are part of the informal sector. So, friends, in this video we have analyzed that new classes emerged in India after independence. This emergence of new classes is based on the economic prosperity, growth and development of industries, and increasing contribution of India in the service sector. We have new professionals coming up who are well educated and meet the international standards of excellence. Thank you.